I always want to bring it back to everyone back at the factory, because I can't say it enough. They're pushing. Like last year, we were kind of stuck in a rut. Now they're finding things, they're adding things to the car, and this weekend, every single weekend, we're bringing small little bits and adding performance to this car.
Oh boy, the plot thickens, because Lewis Hamilton's sprint pole at Silverstone was not just a fast Friday lap, it was the first clear on-track proof that Ferrari's 2026 car finally speaks Hamilton's language in a way the nervous, peaky SF25 never did. That is the real contract here, because after the nightmare of 2025, after the first full season of his Formula One career without a single podium or win, after finishing only 6th in the championship, after watching Charles Leclerc extract podiums from the same Ferrari while Hamilton spent weekend after weekend looking like he was fighting the car instead of attacking the circuit, one lap at Silverstone suddenly felt like evidence. The sacred violation in this story is that people looked at those 3 straight Q1 exits from Las Vegas to Abu Dhabi and pushed the lazy narrative that the 7-time champion was permanently washed, that he simply could not adapt to ground effect machinery, and that Leclerc had exposed him.
Not at all. But the one thing about Lewis that I know about him, he reinvents himself every winter. He comes back stronger every winter.
But Hamilton just dropped the ultimate receipt, topping practice, topping every phase of sprint qualifying, and delivering a 1:28.376 on soft tyres to beat Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes by just 0.011s. Before we get into exactly how this tiny margin shattered the myth of his decline, I need your help. So if you like these Formula One drama breakdowns where the real performance gain is hidden inside the relationship between a driver and his factory, hit subscribe, because this is about the moment Ferrari finally built a weapon for Lewis Hamilton. The true disrespect of 2025 was that Ferrari gave him the dream suit and the history, but trapped him in a chassis with a narrow operating window and rear-end instability that punished his trademark corner entry commitment.
Quite a bit faster in terms of, quite a bit better in terms of degradation compared to us. The soft, we couldn't keep them for long enough, but they could, so that was a surprise. But
Ferrari's own analysis and independent telemetry breakdowns described the SF25 as a machine with chronic understeer on entry, inconsistent rotation through snake sections, and an unstable rear that could turn limited rotation into aggressive exit oversteer. That combination is absolutely brutal for Hamilton, because his entire driving identity is built around a specific peak and release brake profile, where he wants to load the front, commit to the corner, and trust that the rear will hold. But the SF25 forced him to drive around fear, trapping him in a setup that rejected his natural rhythm and forced him to unlearn years of Mercedes habits just to survive the weekend. Hamilton himself called that season a nightmare, a brutal confession that the machine never gave him the foundation he needed to attack a lap, forcing him into a setup sensitivity that rejected his feel, rotation, and trail-breaking instincts. His reaction to the critics was sharp, dragging out a massive contradiction by pointing directly back to his 2024 British Grand Prix win to prove that the ground effect era did not beat him. That specific Ferrari SF25 did, reminding everyone he still produced great races in the US and Silverstone when the platform actually worked.
And then in terms of personal reflection, every weekend I've written down what I felt, what went wrong that weekend, the decisions I've taken. So there's a lot of learnings to do there, and I will, through my break, I will analyze those decisions and make markers on how I can make better decisions.
But then out of nowhere, the second loop opens, because solving this technical mismatch was never just about changing front wing angles. It was about tearing down the political and cultural walls inside Maranello. Hamilton basically admitted that early on, when the results were poor, people tend to listen to you less, exposing the friction between a champion's feedback and an Italian team that did not yet fully trust his translation of the car.
It's not actually a straightforward process. We're obviously testing next week, and then we go back to the factory, and I've got to decide what my approach is when it comes to sitting down with the stakeholders to make the decisions.
He refused to let that dynamic survive, embedding himself in the factory, learning Italian, and sitting with the technical department until the culture shifted, revealing that he focused on creating allyship and showing why change is better for us as a whole. That phrase is the receipt for the internal war he won, proving he deliberately realigned his own group with Ferrari's higher powers so they became allies rather than foes. Once that emotional posture changed, the power dynamic flipped, and Hamilton dropped the hammer by confirming that now, things that I ask for get done. That is the bridge from outsider to influence, chaining directly back to the initial violation because he stopped being a passenger in a flawed concept and became the architect of his own escape.
I mean, up until now, we really have been making such great progress. And what gives me confidence is, I've coming into this weekend, the simulator said that we should start in a much different place with the setup, and I and my engineers decided to stay with one in the direction that we would normally go.
Meanwhile, this is where it gets really interesting, because the SF-26 did not just arrive by accident, it carries his actual fingerprints from conception. Hamilton spent 8 to 10 months in the simulator digging deep with engineers, explaining exactly what he needed from a car's DNA. He forced Ferrari to widen the mechanical setup windows and deliver a platform that is more responsive on turn-in, giving him the permission to rotate the car naturally and trust the rear axle again instead of tiptoeing through fast-flowing sections. That is why his lap at Silverstone looked so ruthless, because he was not fighting inherited compromises. He was driving a machine that rewarded his specific peak and release brake profile, allowing him to claw back the 6/10 Ferrari expected to lose to Mercedes on the straights purely through cornering commitment through Maggots, Beckett's, Chappell, Stowe and Copse. Hamilton confirmed this shift by stating he had been digging deep with the engineers about what he wanted, and after seeing them listen, he now feels more connected to this one for sure. A terrifying promise to the grid that the man who looked trapped is finally loose. But then another rumor started flying through the paddock conversation, and it is a sharp one. Whispers suggest that Ferrari's 2026 power unit and launch maps are already a devastating step ahead of the field, specifically tuned to exploit the new turbo spool and battery deployment rules. Word going around is that during a Bahrain start simulation, Hamilton started 9 places behind the lead car and rocketed into the lead by turn 1, launching so cleanly that trackside engineers were struck by the mechanical advantage. That is a nightmare image for McLaren and Mercedes, because if you give Lewis Hamilton a launch edge that lets him erase grid positions before the first braking zone, he will weaponize it into a first corner massacre, completely destroying rival strategies before the race even settles.
Maybe tomorrow we're inventing something else. That I don't know. I've been on the Epstein files. God knows what. I mean, you're not happy with me saying that, no?
Shrouded speculation even hints that Ferrari actively opposed certain start procedure changes, like the 5-second buffer, because they knew their clutch and throttle mapping was already perfectly calibrated to turn the 2026 starting grid chaos into an automatic track position weapon. Meanwhile, the strategic danger of that launch advantage is completely rewriting race plans, because if Ferrari can consistently clear McLaren and Mercedes before the first braking zone, a car with equal pace that starts behind Hamilton may never see clean air again, forcing rivals to burn through their tyres in dirty air just to undo the damage of the first 2 seconds. This completely changes the championship stakes, because rivals are no longer just fighting his raw pace, they are fighting his ability to rewrite the race architecture instantly, putting cars into dirty air earlier than expected. And this is exactly where the 4th loop opens, because the early Bahrain testing block proved Hamilton was not just relying on the engine, he was methodically reinventing his relationship with the car. On day 1 in Bahrain, he was 1.4 seconds off the pace, running conservative C2 and C3 tyres, correlation passes and aero rake work, which immediately fed the disrespectful narrative that Leclerc was destroying him. But Hamilton ignored the timing screens, prioritizing experimenting with different things and working on the best way to optimize each run, to build a translation system with Ferrari's engineers. By the end of the test block, when the fuel loads and tire profiles converged, Hamilton closed that massive deficit to just 0.031 seconds off Carlos Sainz, proving he had recalibrated his steering inputs and trail braking to match the Ferrari's unique traits. That methodical learning curve curve proves he is dissecting the rulebook, shaping the car's development and preparing to punish anyone who thought one bad session meant the end of his era. But then the fifth loop opens and it brings the heaviest stakes of all, because the reigning world champion is already bracing for impact, proving the grid sees what the critics missed. Lando Norris did not look at Hamilton's 2025 struggles and write him off. Instead, he framed Hamilton as probably the best of all time.
I was very happy to see Lewis on the top step again with Ferrari. It's pretty cool just to watch, even for me as a fan. A fan of Ferrari and Lewis and all of them, then it's special. So it was a cool podium, a good day. I feel like we maximized it, and that's really all we can ask for.
Norris shattered the idea of Hamilton's permanent decline by stating publicly that if anyone can bounce back from difficult years, it's Mr. Hamilton. Norris is not offering charity. He is looking at the telemetry, the testing data, and the cultural shift at Maranello, and admitting he expects battles and wants to see Lewis back at the top. And this is not just Norris freelancing some respectful words about a childhood hero. This fits into a wider paddock pattern where bookmakers, media previews, and Sky pundits are already placing Hamilton in the upper band of title odds for 2026, treating him as a serious name right behind drivers like Russell and Verstappen. Norris knows exactly what happens when you underestimate a seven-time champion, acknowledging that if anyone can bounce back from difficult years, it is Mr. Hamilton, because he has seen Lewis in his mirrors and knows he does not just race, he reads the momentum of a Grand Prix better than anyone. When the defending champion adds you to his primary threat list, that is the ultimate receipt that the comeback is real, proving the paddock is already modelling their strategy around a resurrected Ferrari. The disrespect of calling Hamilton washed was utterly crushed by the reality that the grid's current king expects to fight him for the crown, knowing full well that a competitive Hamilton brings emotional gravity and media pressure that can swallow a season. Hamilton himself is fueling this anxiety, refusing to coast on his legacy.
I'm just useless.
So say again?
I'm just useless.
But that isn't obviously the
It
case.
clearly
You're not.
is.
What?
It clearly is. Just drove terribly. It is what it is.
Was it? Do you just not feel comfortable in the car in that part of quali? Did something change?
Nothing changed.
All right, bad luck, Lewis.
Calling the 2026 regulations monumental and admitting he has done much more study than any other era to master the complex new energy management and active aero demands. He warned that this new generation requires you to be the most efficient driver you've ever been, targeting examples like 600 meters of lift and coast at Barcelona, low gear downshifts, and battery deployment windows with the ruthless precision of a driver who knows exactly where the hidden lap time lives. Rumour has it that Mercedes and McLaren were deeply alarmed by Ferrari's early launch behaviour and wider setup windows, fearing that the SF26 has successfully masked its weaknesses while their own platforms remain fragile and peaky. That is exactly the kind of speculation that ruins sleep for rival strategists, because if Hamilton has a compliant chassis that he inherently trusts, combined with a power unit that launches flawlessly and an aero package that responds to his mid-corner steering style, the debt of 2025 is about to be paid in full. The SF25 stole his confidence, trapped him in understeer, and made him second-guess the rear axle on every corner entry. But the SF26 gave him the platform to take sprint pole at his home track, beating the exact 19-year-old prodigy Mercedes chose to replace him, proving that his driving identity is still lethal when the machine cooperates. He did not just find pace, he built an alliance, reshaped the car's DNA, decoded the most complex regulation change of his career, and forced the entire Formula One paddock to realize that his nightmare installation year is over. So now the debt is sitting right there on the table, heavier than ever, with the reigning champion constantly watching his mirrors and a seven-time world champion holding a Ferrari built from his own meticulous simulator feedback. The situation is still developing. The political pressure inside Maranello is reaching a boiling point, and the real question now is absolutely brutal. Was that Silverstone sprint pole just one perfect Friday on home soil, or was it the first terrifying sign that Ferrari has finally given Lewis Hamilton the weapon he needs to hunt down his 8th world title? And if they truly have, how many teams on the grid are about to realize they wrote off the greatest driver of his generation 1 year too early? So check out this next deep dive to see the exact telemetry data that proves Mercedes and McLaren are already scrambling to counter Ferrari's devastating new launch advantage before the lights even go out.